Welcome back to our youth series today. It is our episode 2 where we are delving deep into the mental health issues that face our youth in the university setting. I am joined by an amazing lady, Cassey Chambers, who has been in this space for a very long time. Welcome, Cassey. Always lovely having you. It's an important milestone, you know, transitioning from high school to university. It's always a big step. We don't really prepare our kids well enough for this transition. We also understand that, you know, during those teenage years, they are most vulnerable when it comes to mental health issues. And now they have to transition into this space where there's not real much support. And they have to figure it all by themselves.
It's such an important conversation because we often forget this group, right? We even know from SADAG's perspective, where we have the helplines and young people calling us from different universities or higher learning institutions, they're really battling. And there could be a number of different factors, right? They could be coming into a university or a college life. Maybe it's the first time they've not been at home. Maybe they're leaving a troubled home and they've taken that baggage with them. University and higher learning is very pressurized. It's a new environment, it's new social structures, new hierarchies. You've gone from high school with a small classroom and here's your schedule for the week to now you're one of hundreds of learners. You're walking on campus that is huge and big and confusing. There's so many different things to overwhelm a learner, and we often just assume that they can get on with it and cope. And it's only a couple of months in that you start to see red flags and you're a bit concerned and think it's adjustment, but actually what we're seeing is more and more young people reaching out, more and more young people who are not coping, who are having feelings of depression or anxiety. Never mind that real life happens during that time, grief, loss, trauma, being more social. So we're seeing an increase in substance abuse because now they've got all this freedom, the pressure of financial issues, because now they're having to budget and running out of budget and money and academics. And there is actually such a big melting pot and all these different contributing factors that can be incredibly overwhelming and incredibly anxiety causing. And we just expect our young people to cope and to carry on. And I think we often forget that they're still children, they're still developing, they're still needing some help, and we don't always have a lot of support. So what we see is an increase in number of calls from young people. Actually, the majority of our calls to SADAG's helplines are from young people, our youth. And that's why it's so important that we're talking about this. To just talk that this is a real issue and just to help parents as to what to look out for. What's normal, what's not normal. So that's really important.
Wow, I mean, we've seen similar stats in the Discovery Health Medical Scheme, data, where we're seeing this increase over time. I mean, in the past 10 years, we've seen around 120% increase in the prevalence of mental health issues in the age group that we are discussing, which is the 19 to 24-year-old age group. But we've also seen, I mean, published data where, you know, there has been some surveys done and some studies done at universities where they see this prevalence of, you know, mental health issues. And I think, Cassey, what's important though is to realize that some of this didn't start when they get to university. And it's just now these, the pressures of universities are just, you know, highlighting an existing problem. Maybe let's start by thinking about the high school years and how we help parents prepare their kids for this transition, because it's going to happen.
It's so true. And I think it's having to be mindful what your child is going into with. You know, there might have been really hectic trauma, anxiety already. They're just coming out of matric exams, perhaps, and they're kind of going from that and then they have to start university. So it's often a very quick transition and we assume that they've got everything put together. But I think being aware as to how your child is going in, what did the last few years look like? What does their life look like? What has maybe happened? When we look, have there been any recent traumas or loss or grief that they've had to deal with? That has a profound impact for a child who's having to transition and adjust to this new adulting world. I think some of the signs and symptoms that a parent can just be aware of, and before any structured tick boxes that you're looking at, is you don't have to have all the tick boxes to say actually something's concerning. You don't even have to have any of the tick boxes. As a parent, you should just have this conversation, whether you're concerned, whether there's a red flag or not. equipping your child, because whatever they're going to face and deal with is giving them the heads up as well. So having that conversation before they're going as to, it can be overwhelming, and that's normal, and it's going to be stressful. It's exciting. It's really like a roller coaster ride, right? Of all these different things that they're having to adjust to. But having that conversation first and foremost is probably the key thing to do before you pick up on any signs and symptoms.
You know, it's so funny because we always say, I went through university and it was okay.
Yes.
If I survived, you should just survive.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is how parents, think about the transition period. But they don't understand that sometimes, times have changed.
Yeah.
There are different pressures. What are those things that the current youth are facing that, if I think about myself, I didn't have a cell phone when I went to varsity. I left home. There were no pressures that relate to social media. It was really me, my friends, studying and worrying about maybe basic things. And I used to just stay at res and ate the food at res, and I didn't worry about much. But there are additional pressures that our kids face today. And maybe let's unpack a bit of that and see how we can equip our parents to actually be mindful of the changing times and the different pressures that our young people are facing.
It's so true what you say when we as parents often say, but it's normal transition, you should be excited, you should be grateful, kind of carry on, I did it. What that actually creates is some distance between you and your child, because you're not actually connecting and saying, I know it's hard, I've also been there, it was hard, maybe it's a bit different, but you can do hard things and we can figure it out together. What we also know is that our world now looks so different than it did 10, 20 years ago. And often as adults, we forget and we want our kids just to be hardy, not to deal with any problems and build that bit of grit, right? That resilience. The only way that you're able to build that grit and resilience is if you talk about, yes, it was hard. This is what I did to cope, or this is how I managed, or maybe how I didn't manage, and you figure out new pathways. I think when we're looking at what's different now than 10 or 20 years ago, I think, yes, there's all these pressures. There's a lot more academic pressure because students who do get into whatever course you're looking to or whatever stepping stone course, you have to work harder than the person sitting next to you. It's also a totally different new environment, a different way of learning, a different classroom environment. The lecturer doesn't know you by name. You've got deadlines. If you miss it, they don't care that you've slept in or you were sick. So it's a totally different academic world to adjust to than it back then. Our online, social media, our friends, our relationships have a huge, profound impact. And it should, because when you're a young person, our relationships mean so much, right? We're still developing. Our brains are still developing. So those relationships mean a lot. You're also now in a new environment. You're making new friends. You're figuring out who you are in this big, bad world. So you're creating all these different hierarchies. You're getting involved in different sports. There's so many different factors that our universities and our higher learning institutions look like now. And then throwing in that our world looks different post-COVID. We're living in a world where we're constantly inundated with different adjustments, load shedding, water problems, politics, unemployment, poverty. Our kids aren't immune to that. And we often think that they're not connected, but they're so aware. And I think when you're adding all of these things to it, it is very different. And what we've seen from the people reaching out is that our young people don't have the coping skills. They don't have the language to say, I'm actually not coping, I'm not doing okay, until we see it's a crisis, until we see the signs and symptoms of something that's really impacting their daily functioning, their ability to cope, being able to go to varsity, their relationships, family. And that's when we're seeing that they're needing crisis intervention, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or even being hospitalized. There are some also stats that 1 in 4 university students have a mental health issue. That's a lot of young people who are dealing with this. So when we look at it, is we can't look at it in isolation. And instead of just saying, carry on, equip, rather for a parent to say, well, tell me what is stressing you right now.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important. And I think it's really understanding what that support looks like. Because, I mean, you need your family, you need your friends. And sometimes you may have strained relationships with your family and with your friends. Then what?
Absolutely. We can't assume everyone in the movies is that happy family. A lot of teenagers and young people going into varsity are actually leaving a very hostile environment at home, or unsafe, or a traumatic. So actually for them, university, a different place, is a safe space for them. But then they've also got the pressures. You have to come home and you have to do well so that you can look after the family. There's so many different things. I think what we're also looking at is if a young person or even a parent has a strained relationship, and we say that to parents who of high school learners and even primary school learners, if you don't have a close relationship or you're not close in communicating, as long as your child is talking to someone, so building that safe space, knowing what resources are available, if there's another friend or an adult, or they feel more comfortable talking to an auntie or a cousin, whatever support system that is, we have to build it. Also letting university students know maybe there's a bit more stigma within the family where mental health isn't really spoken about or accepted, so they're not really comfortable to talk to mom and dad about their feelings of depression. Depression isn't even something that is spoken about in their family or society. Then we're having to look at what resources are on campus. And I think when we see that majority of universities have some student counseling or support that's available, and that could be over the phone, it could be face-to-face, that's for free, accessible to all students, no matter what year you're in, whatever you're studying. And I think students don't know about that or how to tap into that resource for free.
When should parents and also the students start worrying that maybe I'm not coping, you know, because, you know, we all go through stress and we all experience it in various ways. But what are the warning signs to say, actually, this person is not coping and something needs to happen? And I think it's important for both the parents to be able to pick up those signs, and also for the student themselves to say, maybe I need to be reaching out and getting extra help. Exactly the resources that we're saying are available at university. How do they know now I need to set up a session with a counselor at varsity, or I need to reach out to a friend, or I need to be calling home to say I'm actually not coping?
And I think this is where even us as adults, we're learning, right? We're in a society where we're very used to stress. There's so many different factors that can cause it. And it's almost become quite a popular cultural term to say I'm stressed, because everyone is stressed, because there's so many things that can cause stress. There's good stress and bad stress, which we all know about. Good stress, such as a deadline, an exam, an assignment that's due, can actually push us to work harder and perform better to get the results that we want. Bad stress starts to happen when you're pulling all-nighters. You're not managing your time. You're starting to see that you're not sleeping well, you're not eating because you're so stressed. You're not able to function. So you're missing class. You're not able to go to class. You're not going home and chatting and connecting with family or friends. You're starting to isolate yourselves from things that are happening. And university and higher learning is when everything is social, right? You're finding and discovering. So if we see some of those red flags of not managing stress well as a parent, not communicating, withdrawing, isolating, feeling really negative around the world, and there's no hope, and what's the point, and I can't do this anymore. But not just one day or 2 days that they're saying it, but over a period of even 2 to 4 weeks. Some of the biggest markers that as a parent you can look for is a change in eating or sleeping habits. Saying things like, well, what's the point to all of this? So symptoms of depression, isolating or withdrawing from family and friends, and kind of going missing class and not seeing friends and not answering their phones all the time. Then you've also got side from the student is how do they then start to identify I'm actually not doing well, I'm not coping. Feeling very quick, agitated, angry, quick to fight and quite snappy, not sleeping well, not eating. Pulling those all-nighters are not self-sufficient. That can really hamper our health. So we're finding digestive problems, stomach issues, headaches, some of those physical symptoms that we don't always link to stress, but that as a young person, we're actually teaching them on what kind of join the dots are we looking at to paint the picture as actually I'm not coping and I need to speak to someone. So as a parent, we have to also prep ourselves. It doesn't stop when you just hand over your child to the university and they've got all these skills, but actually having those conversations, knowing what to look out for and how to really educate your child and to do that mental health check-in.
Wow. Thank you so much, Cassey. So join us again for our next episode where we're going to be delving even deeper in understanding depression, anxiety, and some other mental health issues that face our students at the university level. Thank you.